This is a really cool event. We do something similar in Manchester, where I'm from. We tend to be a little bit more user experience focused rather than the whole kind of digital spectrum. And we tend to get anywhere between 20 and about 50 people. So this is so cool to see a room this size of people really interested from such a mix of disciplines. What I'm going to talk about is up there, and there's the usual hashtags and nonsense. But before I really start, this is a massive bugbear of mine. Not her tweet is amazing, but the subject of her tweet is a massive bugbear. Lisa is head of user research at the Government Digital Services, the Cabinet Office. So before I start, it's not user testing. We're not testing users. It's usability testing, or it's user research. However, just to bear with me. What I also find, if you're looking to get a bit more engagement, a bit more traction from your clients or from your bosses, if you actually frame it in terms of customers, if you call it customer experience or testing with customers or customer research, gets a little bit more attention because customers usually have a monetary value attached to them. They've got a bit of a revenue. Customers equals revenue. So testing with customers, and I find if you find yourself in a conversation about the user experience with a client and they're not necessarily giving you the attention you need, substitute the word user for customer in your email and watch them listen. Cool, right. Okay, yeah, that's clearly not me, but it's a really nice picture of a chimpanzee, so I really like that. It's not even a gorilla, is it? It's a chimpanzee. Anyway, yes. So just a little bit of background about me. I've been doing this stuff for years. Not this stuff. This is quite new, so I'm a little bit nervous. I apologize. But I've been doing the kind of UX and kind of front-end stuff before that for years. I've watched the web grow and turn into a horrible, horrible, ugly child. And then it's starting to kind of blossom again now. It's really nice. I've been doing UX for about 7 or 8 years now. I've been working for these guys for about 18 months. We've got offices in Manchester. For anybody that knows Manchester, that's overlooking the old Hacienda. Get in. We've also got offices in Soho and then somewhere in Liverpool, which is like the nether regions, which we never go to. Now, Amaze have been really nice in letting me prepare this and do this on their time, so I feel obliged to just quickly rattle through some stuff. I'm not going to do too much, but they wanted me to tell you how good they are and then show some pretty pictures about some of our bigger clients. But pretty pictures. That one's won some awards. It's really good, actually. Yeah, it's got some pretty pictures. We're going to put these slides, I'll put these slides online and send Matt the details, so don't worry about anything. If you really want to look at the pretty pictures in more detail, they'll be there. Cars. We like cars at Amaze. We do a lot of car websites. Very odd. Anyway, yes, right, why you're here. There's the most common types of usability testing. It's a little bit low to keep leaning down for this. The most common types of usability testing, the ones that most people will probably have heard of, even if they're not necessarily UX people, will be the moderated lab testing, remote testing, and then eye tracking, which usually happens itself in a moderated lab. Now, they're really structured, really formal. There's a lot of rigor around them. Everybody knows that they give really good, thorough, in-depth results. Moderated lab testing is probably the most common one. Usually takes place in a session like this. So I'm terrible with microphones. So yeah, you've got dedicated agencies that do this. You've got a lot of digital agencies who will have a team of people who can do this if asked. Basically, sit in a room, get some people off the street in, usually vetted a little bit to make sure that they've got some experience of what you're testing. You set them a series of tasks, and then you say, go, and you film them. And it's great. And you do it for about 45 minutes, an hour, a session. And you do maybe 5 or 6 in a day. You'll do it for a couple of days. And then you'll go away, and then you'll spend 2 weeks writing a report. 2 weeks of billable time for the client. That's where they get very nervous, because it's very expensive, very time-consuming. Yeah, that's kind of what it usually looks like. You usually end up with 2 deliverables. You end up with a big report that takes about a week to digest. Never mind, it took a fortnight to write. And then maybe 5, maybe 10 of these videos, all of which are about an hour long. So if the client's really keen, evenings and weekends, you can go and watch all these, because that'll happen. Remote usability testing can be really useful. I guess in the last 5, 10 years, there's been a lot of people started doing this. All these nice people here, for example, we do a lot of work with what users do up in Manchester. I know UserZoom are quite big, Loop 11's another big one. Remote usability testing, what you typically do is these organizations will have a group of people, they'll have like a pool of participants, and you can basically give them a website, give them a set of tasks, and they will farm that out to their pool of people, and they will do it at home, in the bedroom, or in the dining room, or on the bus, and this is really important, they'll do it wherever it is they normally do this stuff. And there's usually like a browser plugin or something like that that records the session. Some of the software will encourage you to vocalize what you're doing, so that's a really important part of it, some of it doesn't. But the theory is that you can put it out there to 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 people, harvest all the results, big automated process on the back end, will aggregate stuff and tell you what the kind of the best stuff is. And to a certain extent, you can just press a button and then come back in a couple of weeks and let these people worry about the finer detail. But again, it can be quite scary, and in order to do this, you actually have to have a live system. It's very difficult to do this on prototypes. The other form of testing which is really common is eye tracking, which is amazing because it produces loads of really cool graphs, stuff like this. Eye tracking is really weird. If you don't work in UX, people tend to find eye tracking a terrifying thing. That's because historically, it's always looked like this. So it's not like you're at some orthodontist or you've been in a car crash or something. Over the last few years, well, last couple of years, it's really come on to the point now where it's essentially a souped up kind of, wow, that dates me, I was going to say VDU. It's a souped up kind of monitor that does all the eye calibration and it looks where you're staring and does all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. What is still scary about eye tracking though is the deliverables. If you engage an eye tracking company to go and do some eye tracking studies on your website, they give you this kind of stuff. Now, hopefully, if you pay them enough, they'll give you some reports. But without the reports, the data is really difficult to draw any meaningful conclusions of. Apart from knowing that the darker red bits mean they've stirred longer, and the really kind of faint bits mean they haven't really given it much attention, I wouldn't know what conclusions to draw from the example on the far right, for example. So what does that tell you? But somebody somewhere can draw some meaningful conclusions from this, and that's why you pay them quite a lot of money to do this. But it's cool, because it's good. And all three of those methods will produce some really sound results. The more forward-thinking clients, or the clients with the bigger budgets, will love it, and they're happy to go for that. However, not everyone can. Now, we did, the organisation I kind of, no, not organisation, the group that I do up in Manchester, we call Northern User Experience, because everybody in the north likes to shout about being northern. We work with, as I say, we work with what users do, and what users do did this report in conjunction with e-consultancy, and it's a big report, and it's absolutely fascinating, and it tells you loads of really interesting stuff. Now, I've got a couple of kind of choice slides here. So, one question they asked, now they asked client-side people and agency-side people. They said, why do you usability test? So, there's a whole range of answers, and for the bulk of it, the clients and the agencies said the same kind of stuff. What's really interesting is this one near the bottom here, whereas the agency said a lot more people in the agencies said this than the clients, because that's basically validating the deliverables. So it's basically covering your ass. So the client aren't necessarily bothered. They want the agency to be the expert. And this is something I've found a lot, is that clients are reluctant to pay for something that they are, in their minds, already paying you to know because you're the expert. So it can be a little bit difficult to justify some of this kind of stuff. Essentially, all those different graphs, they all boil down to three main reasons. The reasons they test are to improve the decision making, to remove the guesswork from the whole situation, and to remove experience bias. Now, what I mean by that is that if they spend, a marketing manager or a digital manager will spend 6 or 7 hours of their working day staring at their website or their competitor's website. They lose a bit of perspective. They get to know their own website too much, and they get to know their competitors a little bit too much as well. So they've got a really kind of skewed frame of reference. So By testing, you're introducing your customers / users into this equation, and it makes it all a little bit more valid. It's a little bit more real. So the other interesting slide in there for me was when they asked why don't we always test? So again, there's quite a distribution. The interesting thing about this particular distribution is that there are 2 or 3 answers there where the agency's answers far outweigh the clients. And all the answers tend to boil down to these kind of 3 things. It's too expensive, it's too time or resource consuming, or it's just not a primary concern, which worries me, to be honest. But the first 2, you hear it all the time. It costs a fortune, and it takes ages. And quite often it costs a fortune because it takes ages, because it's all billable hours. So at Amaze, we've got this particular kind of slant on testing. It's kind of like Guerrilla usability testing, but it's a particular variant on it. It really works for us in most situations. We call it 15 for 15. No. My boss calls it 15 for 15. I call it £15 for 50 minutes because I hate the little 15 thing. Anyway, yes. But basically, it's based on the whole lab testing situation, and it uses the same kind of conventions and processes and think aloud stuff. So you set a task. While they're doing the task, you ask them to vocalize what it is they're thinking. If you see them struggling, you ask them to explain what it is they're looking for, what they can't see, all that kind of stuff that you'd normally do with a lab test. One of the key differences is that you do it in Guerrilla environments. So basically, it's very unlikely that anybody will be using your website in a lab where it's really quiet and they'd be brought water or tea and coffee and biscuits by your receptionist. We did some stuff a few years ago when I was at a different company with Butlins. A combination of analytics and marketing data basically suggested to us that the usage cycles for their website were such that between, I think, 3 and 5 o'clock in the evening on a weekday, the website was being trawled heavily for content. And then purchases were being made really, really instantaneously at about 7:30, 8 o'clock. So we derived from that, we hypothesized from that it was the mum of the family was looking at the website with the kids after they come home from school, checking out what do you want to do for the summer kids. They like it, they go away, they have the family meal. After they've had the meal, they negotiate kind of what we're going to do with the father, and then they decide to book it. So this is really interesting. So we tested the website in people's houses where there was like screaming kids, washing machines going in the background, kettles boiling, baby sterilizer alarm going off. And it's not until you see that kind of stuff in action that you actually realize that, Christ, how can anybody concentrate on your beautiful website with all that stuff going on, with little Tommy breaking stuff, little Ginny kind of poking stuff into your DVD player? Impossible. So if you can test in these kind of environments where people really use your website, it can be really enlightening. What we also do, we like to recruit in the wild. Now, we're very lucky that in every one of our offices, we share the building with some other organisations. So in Manchester, we share it with the council. In Liverpool, we share it with 4 or 5 other organisations, Granada, Prince's Foods, and a few others. But basically, what we do is we'll print out a note, £15 for 50 minutes, come and help us test a website, and we'll put it in the lift or in the reception with an email address. And then the poor old receptionist in our office will field these different emails. But basically, it takes about half an hour, and you tend to have enough respondents to do your test. So you can kind of, if you need to pre-qualify, you can kind of go back to them and say, well, have you ever used a particular brand of soap powder, or do you run, or anything? So you can do that, but the point is that you can actually kind of get your participants really, really easily just by looking around you. You could walk into Starbucks, if you're fortunate enough not to share your office building with half a dozen other organisations, go down to Starbucks, or Nero's, or independent coffee shops, or anywhere. We did some really cool stuff for East Coast train line, and my colleague he sat on a train going up and down England all day, and he just went up to people and said, have you got 5 minutes? And they went, yeah, of course, yeah, because it's another 20 minutes to my stop. So, and we just recruited that way, just on the train. It was fantastic. The other thing to really bear in mind, now I'm a chronic perfectionist, so if there's any typos in this, please tell me, because it'll kill me. But the other thing is the prototype that you're testing has to be good enough. There's a fine line between a black and white outliney, wireframey thing, which people might struggle to actually understand what it is, and then a polished thing that you've spent ages doing. What I tend to find is that if you do it good enough, if there's any little quirks, you can just talk around it. Every test session I've ever done in this kind of format, you find yourself saying, oh, it's just the prototype so often. And people get it, it's fine, it's fine. You can kind of explain any weird quirks of behavior or lack of detail or things away from that. The other thing to do is just to, if you are building a prototype to test and you're trying to build it quickly, is just focus on what the key tasks are. So if your website is selling shoes, think about what the different patterns are where people might come to your website and they're looking for shoes. They might be looking for a new pair, they might be looking to replace an old pair, they might be looking for some black work shoes, they might be looking to return some shoes. But if you can focus on 2 or 3 really core user journeys and just test them, because it doesn't matter that you're not testing everything else, because you're doing this for 15 minutes, and in a couple of weeks, you can do it again for 15 minutes with some other user journeys. So don't worry about trying to test the whole world. And this is the key one. This is the big time saver for me, is the reporting on the problem areas. Now, typical moderated lab test, if you go to someone like Bunnyfoot or Foolproof or any of the other kind of consultants who do moderated lab testing, that's their raison d'etre, it's what they do. They will likely give you a big-ass Word document with 20,000 words in and loads of stuff. And it's great, and it's so thorough, but it lacks context, because they'll say things like, one of our customers suggested you make these shoes in blue. You should make them in blue. It's irrelevant. Well, it can be irrelevant, so I shouldn't dismiss. But it's not actionable. The way we report is essentially, it's like a bullet point list, and it's actionable. Everything we put on a report, the client can take away and go, I like that, we'll do that. Not convinced about that. I want to find out more about that, let's retest. Everything, and it's about actionable, and it only takes them 5 minutes to read. So they can read it while you're on the phone to them, they don't have to go away and read it over a weekend. It just really saves your time in producing it and their time in digesting it. What it also does is it focuses the client. Because they're expecting, because it's framed as a Guerrilla thing and it's framed as a lo-fi, quick and dirty kind of test, they're not expecting you to test the world. They're not expecting your tests to be so rigorous that you can't find any holes in it. It's cool, it's okay, it's good enough. So this is a really famous kind of graph by Nielsen Norman. Basically, they did loads of maths and loads of complicated stuff, which I haven't got a clue what it means, to work out what the optimum number of people to test. And they worked out that if you wanted to find 100% of every problem on your website, you needed 15 people. But that's great, but if you watch the arc of the graph, it kind of peaks at around about 5 or 6. Now, that's the sweet spot, is 5. If you test with 5 people, you'll get around about 85% of your issues. So what you'll do is you test with 5 people, and you'll get 85% of them. You'll go away, you'll fix as many as you can, then you'll retest. And it's about the iterations. It's better off to test 3 times with groups of 5 than it is to test with 15, because you just fix more problems. So just a quick case study. One of the accounts that I've been working on for the last kind of 12, 18 months is ASICS, or ASICS if you're American, ASICS to the rest of the world. Blah, 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 4th largest sportswear manufacturer in the world, something under Adidas and Nike and all that kind of stuff. The ASICS America website went live in March, I believe. And we've got a process of continuing kind of optimization and refinement. And what we'll do is we'll identify half a dozen things which we think we couldn't get in the first release, or we think actually now we might like to change. And we'll iterate over them, we'll just test them. So from a tools point of view, it's great. So we use Axure, so it's like a really cool wireframing tool. What you can do is you can drop your Photoshop documents into it, and then you can mark them all up so that bits can be clickable. And you can spoof a website. And the bits you don't have designs for, you can just put boxes in, it's fine. As I say, you can talk around it. Silverback is amazing. Silverback is the app that records your sessions and puts a little camera thing in the bottom corner. It's really cool. And Vimeo is a really nice way of just distributing the video to the test sessions at the end of it. They look like that, as you've already seen. So basically, I mean, I'll kind of rattle through this, or I'll ramble a little bit. But the 3 stages that we went through was preparation. So when you start recruiting, while you're recruiting, you work out what you're going to test, and you prototype it. Then you test it. Now, because we were recruiting from office workers in the same building, we were conscious of intruding on their working day. So we'll have slots at lunchtime and then right at the tail end. This works really well at First Street, where we are, because they're council workers, and council workers tend to start work early and finish early, so they'll do like 8 till 4. So they'll come in and they'll get 15 quid and then they can go to the pub. And then, as I say, the report, where it's all basically bullet point lists of what you can action, and then we'll just phone the client up and talk them through it. Typical turnaround for that is 3 days for the prep, of which the bulk of that is actually wireframing and prototyping the thing you're going to test. The testing is a day. Because the tests are quite nimble, quite light, you can, if you've got 2 or 3 colleagues, you can test in parallel, so you can actually do 15, or as many as you want really, in that kind of slot. And then the reporting takes about a day. It takes half a day to produce, another half a day to talk the client through. So the big thing is, it's 1 week start to finish, really easily digestible report, because that's what the client cares about. They don't care about watching the videos. They care about what they need to know as a result of those videos happening. And then the actionable findings is what can they do based on what you've found in those videos. So there's just a few kind of, been doing this for the best part of a year now, so we've got quite a few things that we've found along the way. The one is, it sounds really obvious, but if you've never done your own testing, it's very easy to fall into this. Avoid recruiting experts. Unless your website or web app or app is aimed at Linux geeks, don't recruit Linux geeks, because it's not your average audience. If it's a middle-aged woman, if it's a middle-aged housewife, or if it's a 25-year-old lad about town, recruit those people, because their world of you, their experiences with digital, their experience with your brand, are the kind of things that you really need to extract, and it gives you a more valid test. This kind of harks back to this doing it in small groups and doing it repeatedly, as test small things as early as you can in your development cycle, your design cycle, and test them often. Do 5 1 week, and then the next week think about it, and then the week after test some more, and then the next week think about it, and just do it in these kind of 2 or 3 week iterations if you can. As many as you can. It's all good, because it will all find good stuff. Like I was saying before, if you can test in real environments, you really should. If you can test in Starbucks or Nero or independent coffee shops, or if you can test on the bus or on the train, do it. The results will be so much more valid. Again, when you're writing your report, don't worry about saying user A could do this, user B could do that, and everybody could do it, so it's all good. Say user A couldn't do this, user B was worried about it, user C thought it meant something else. Just focus on what you need to change. Now this is something that applies whatever test protocol you use. Is don't give instructions, give tasks. Say you're looking to return a pair of shoes, or your running shoes are wearing out, you need some new ones. Don't say, can you find a pair of greens, size 9, yada yada yada, because they'll be looking for greens, size 9, yada yada yada. It just skews the results. This is a really important one. If you're testing 2 or 3 or more scenarios at a time, rotate the order. Because if you test A, B, and C with everybody in that order, by the time you get to test C, if C is can you return your shoes, everybody will have seen the returns link, maybe, because they've already seen it on a product page or something like that. So if you change the order of it, you replicate more, because if I'm looking to return a pair of shoes, I'm not going to go browse in the catalogue. I want to see the returns. So just rotate the order of them. You get more, you get truer results. For a chronic perfectionist, this is a difficult one. The fidelity, i.e. the quality of the wireframes, do they look like a nice polished website? It kind of matters, but not as much as I like to think it does. I was speaking over Twitter to a lady earlier who's here tonight who was doing some paper prototyping. So she'd drawn out on paper some screens and some interfaces, and she was going to the station to test that, which is incredibly brave because it was quite windy. But, but also because, in my own personal experience, you have to kind of say, right, pretend that this is a screen, and I always struggle with that, pretend this is. So if it looks and works as much like a website as possible, You can caveat the rest and you can explain it away, but it's finding that little sweet spot, the right balance between the fidelity and just spending far too long designing a prototype that will get thrown away. This is a really important one. It's a very easy trap to fall into when you do testing, is 5 people's opinions are not the absolute truth. If you test with 5 people and 5 of them all say, "Do you know, Mr. Ford, your car's lovely, but..." Well, I'm going to say this, I'm biased because I like black. But they'll say, "Mr. Ford, your car's lovely, but you should do it in yellow." Henry Ford would not have had that, because he knows that 5 people's opinions are not conclusive proof that a car should be in any other colour than black. Now, what you can do, you can infer stuff. You can say, the majority of participants found this. The majority of participants found that. Not many participants could do this, or could. You can't, there's no absolutes in this kind of stuff, because it's not a scientific, rigorous process where you're testing thousands and thousands of people. You don't have the sample data to be able to say these things are absolutes. Having said that, you can make some pretty convincing arguments if you could with words. And this is something I love. I love user testing because the stuff people come out with is ridiculous. Whether it's just so absurd you want to kind of punch yourself in the face, or because it's like an absolute light bulb, forehead slapping, oh my God, how did I miss that kind of moment. But the stuff people say, you get such amazing insights. If you can share your test videos with designers and devs and clients, it helps if they're only 15 minutes long because they can look at them in the lunch break. But if you can share them, you should, because they will get so much out of it. Because I'll guarantee you, half of this stuff, it will not have occurred to those people. And then my last point is from the legend of UX, Steve Krug. And this is such a truism. Testing with one person is 100% better than testing with none. If you don't have a budget for it, you don't have an army of people ready to do it, you don't have a client who's interested, show your boyfriend or girlfriend or mum or the woman at the bus stop. Show anyone. I'll give them a quick, maybe explain the background, but then just say, what do you think of that? You will have to make a judgment call on how much you take their results as gospel, but I guarantee it's better than asking no one at all. So there's a few links there. I mean, these slides will go up online, and there's some really good reading there. I realise I'm wearing black, and we're using Apple products, but one more thing is, the group, this is a bit of a plug now, I apologise, but the group that I'm organised in, Northern User Experience, we're doing a big-ass conference in Manchester. This is big for us. We usually have 30 to 40, 50 people. We're organising like a kind of 300-400 thing in Manchester at the end of October. Tickets have been selling really, really well. Because we've got some our keynote is this lady here is Susan Weinschenk, who is like a living legend of UX and psychology and design. She's got several books. She's amazing. The rest of the guys is like CX Partners, USwitch, eBay, BBC. Represent their amazing bunch. If you find yourself up north, and you should, because it's lovely. It doesn't always rain. It'd be really cool to see you at this. I've probably talked for hours, but thank you.
Well, questions, from the back.
So how the savings that you make when you do Guerrilla testing as opposed to the long form 2-week report writing, how much do those savings do your clients see?
Okay, so the chap at the back asked about savings on Guerrilla testing versus a more kind of long form moderated lab test and how you can pass them on. The big thing about Guerrilla testing is once you've got your copy of Azure, and once you've agreed to give the 15 quid away or buy them a coffee wherever you are, your only real expense is billable time. So whatever your kind of day rate, if you're an agency, is, your kind of 7.5 hours a day for a week. That's the only cost. If you look at kind of more like eye tracking is a great example because the hardware for that is quite expensive. Remote user testing, you pay per test. So it's like a flip. You've got to kind of work out how many customers is a valid test. Too many will end up costing you, and you probably get the same results again and again. Moderated lab tests, you're paying, most of the time, if you use an external agency, then you're paying for their facilities and their expertise. which is great because these guys are really good at it, but it's also quite expensive. And then they also spend a long time writing the report. It's all about, for that kind of test, it's all about the report, which is a massive tome. It's usually about half an inch thick, and nobody reads it. People want an executive summary of it. They'll give it to someone and say, can you highlight the important bits? Those kind of things can cost, I guess depending on the agency or if you do it internally, can likely cost maybe £3,000-4,000 between up to maybe 10, 15, depending on the scale of what you're doing and the price of the agency. With the Guerrilla stuff, you can do it for a couple of grand. I guess whatever your day rate is. I think that chap just beat you to it.
The application on the phones,
Yes.
is the same kind of websites or different ones to do that?
So, sorry, you're asking about testing forms? Oh, mobile apps, right, cool, yes. They're a little bit trickier, purely because quite often, if you've got a prototype, it's very difficult to get your prototype onto somebody's phone because you either have to make it available as a website and then anybody could find it, and you're reliant on testing somewhere with a 3G signal or a Wi-Fi. But there are workarounds. What we did with the East Coast train thing was we found an app. Sorry, I wasn't involved in the project, so I can't remember the name, but there was an app which could basically wrap a website as an app. Yes. You are amazing. It's called Test Flight. It basically allows you to take a website, turn it into an app, and then publish it to your handset. Now, what we did is we put it onto an iPhone, we did an Android version, we didn't bother with Windows because nobody has Windows phones. But basically, and then we went up and down the train and we went, excuse me, have you got 5 minutes? And they went, yes. They go, have you got a smartphone? Yes. What is it? Galaxy? Right, okay, we've got a Samsung Galaxy now, there you go. So we can kind of test in their native device. It's not always the same handset because there's a billion different Androids. The trick was the recording of those sessions. I say my colleague put together this amazing device. It's a bit Heath Robinson. It's like an iPhone car caddy to attach it to your dashboard. And then it's a USB webcam on a bendy thing. And then a couple of cable ties. And basically, you give it to them, and the camera kind of leans over the top on it, and it films the screen. So you can see the screen, you can see what they're clicking. You don't quite get the voice like you would with a desktop app software, but it can get you what you need. And if you're doing short sessions, it's easy enough to remember what's been said. So as soon as the session's finished, you just go away and jot some notes down, and then you've got the video to refer to of people scrolling and interacting with it. It's not foolproof because sometimes the lighting in the room can interact with the screen, but it's really cool. And people always give it a really amused look when you pull out this big steam-powered thing, right? Yes?
My question is about prototyping. So prototyping is like activity, for example, rather than if you're still coding, you have access to a front-end developer and you can send your prototype to them. What would you like? Would you do it in Accio first, or would you give it to your front-end developer and get into develop the prototype and then do like 50-50?
Yeah. So the question was prototyping for testing. Is it better to produce it like a front-end actual interactive website, or be it a fairly low-fi one, or is it preferable to do it? To be honest, this is a great caveat, and I've worked in UX for years, and you find yourself saying this so often. It depends. It's whatever is best for your agency. If you have people who are your ninjas and can turn out the most amazing stuff in 20 minutes, do that. If you have front-end legends who can bosh something out there which will look and work like a real website, test that. Whatever works for you. It's about getting something that people can look at and think, I understand what this is doing now. If it looks and works like a website, it doesn't matter if it is one or if it's a picture of one. So it's whatever's good for you.
So I've got like two things. First of all, like it seems that the problem with classic testing, like it seems to be split into the expense of carrying it out and then the complication of the report.
Yes.
But if it was carried out and you've got a simple then it seems like the original eye testing or just using a larger sample set is far more useful because there's a statistic from you take 5 random people you find in a lift, they're going to be from the same sort of socioeconomic background, they'll have the same user experience, particularly if they're working in an office. And that's going to skew results horribly.
You're good. Okay, so your first question was about the validity of testing with a small number of people and testing in such a kind of fairly lightweight guerrilla kind of way. And I think you suggested that if you could do a more structured lab test, but if it's all about the deliverable, if it's all about the report, what if the report was just lightweight? Which is really good. In terms of the 5 people, I mean, we've been quite lucky that, I think you're right, because you tend to get office workers, but certainly with the council building, you've got people who are phone operatives, you've got people who are planning executives for all kinds of exotic stuff that probably never gets the funding anymore. But I think when you recruit, you have to make sure you get the broad spectrum, because by and large, most organisations' customers come from a broad spectrum. We've been lucky in that our office locations have allowed us to pick people from various kind of tiers of working life and social life and things like that. In terms of the more fully, I guess there's still the problem with that is that you've got to set up the tests, you've got to have the facilities to do that. So it's whilst it is possible to do all that and to produce a really lean, lightweight report that's easy to digest, I think that you've still got to have a lab to do it in. And also, trying to sell that into the client that they're going to pay a few thousand for you to sit for 2 days in a big expensive lab, and then they get a bullet point list at the end of that is a difficult sell. If it's framed as something that's Guerrilla and we're doing it tomorrow and you'll have the results the day after, then they'll buy into the bullet point list a lot more. They don't necessarily expect as much from you. Because the reality is that the bullet point list is usually enough anyway, whatever testing you've done. Because people just want to know what's broke.
I've got one more thing to say, which is if anyone is interested in testing this stuff on websites, there's actually quite a cool thing online called experiment.ly, something like that, and it generates the heat maps you can make in the browser. And so you can do something Google did quite early in their development, which is their load maps are getting 2 different versions of the site, 2 different people, and then you can see in the wild which one people is on better to with the sort of heat map you're talking about.
That's good. So experiment.ly. Cool, okay. Because there are quite a few tools out there that do like the A/B test. So you can put 2 versions of a page up and it will load balance between them. But the real-time kind of heat map stuff is really interesting. I haven't seen it, so I'm not sure what it produces, but I would suggest you still need somebody with experience of interpreting those kind of results to draw any meaningful conclusions. But it's really cool that you can get those kind of results without the big expensive hardware, absolutely. And if you can combine that with the remote testing thing where you can throw like 10, 20,000 people at it, if you could throw a load of people at it, then your data will inherently be more statistically valid. It's just interpreting the results. It can be a bit tricky. That sounds really cool. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Barry Briggs.